Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you may be listening to us from here on this big, beautiful planet we call Earth. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions. A while back, I did a couple of discussions you can find if you go on my YouTube station about the advantages of psychopathic behavior to an individual. I also did an accompanying video that was called The Disadvantages of Psychopathic Traits to an Individual. And I thought that maybe what would be really good is to also deal with this in regards to society. So I thought what I would do is deal with, and again, this is controversial, don't turn off that dial now, but I think you'll find this quite stimulating, and also if you're intellectually curious about these kinds of issues, I think you're going to enjoy this. But it's going to be like 10 advantages to society of psychopathic behavior, or having psychopaths in the population. Before I begin, I'd just like to make a plug here, in the spirit of Edward Bernays, make a plug here. If you're into literature that deals with psychopathy, but also science fiction, check out my new book, The Destiny of Our Past, and you can find that on Amazon. If you want something that's more into politics and conspiracy and those kinds of things, you could check out my most recent book in the series, Freedom from Conscience, The Price of Power. And if you're kind of into Illuminati type stuff and things, I think you'll find that interesting. And again, both books have a basis in regards to psychopathy. Now, let's go ahead and begin. Now, what I found recently was an article it's a few years old, but it was in the December 30th, 2012 Business Insider. Talk about psychopaths. And in it, there was a quote in the article from Professor Kevin Dutton, who's done a lot of research on this topic. And the quote is, and again, you can look this up, December 30th, 2012, "Psychopaths are assertive. Psychopaths don't procrastinate. Psychopaths tend to focus on the positive. Psychopaths don't take things personally. They don't beat themselves up if things go wrong, even if they're to blame. And they're pretty cool under pressure. Those kinds of characteristics aren't just important in the business arena, but also in everyday life." Now, yes, you probably get all these horror stories about my husband was a psychopath, or my wife was a psychopath, my business partner was a psychopath, and in all these cases they got cheated and their lives destroyed, by these individuals. I will note, though, that I think there's way more people that get labeled as psychopaths because, you get mad at your ex or your business partner if they do something bad to you. And of course, it's easy to say, they're psychopaths. But it may not actually be in the clinical sense. Okay? Just because you do something bad or do something to harm someone or don't show very much feelings towards someone doesn't make you a psychopath. You can look up, again, this isn't a plug here, it's just a way to look up some of the information on what a psychopath is. I did an article on my Freedom from Conscience website. Again, you look up Freedom from Conscience. Is my fill in the blank a psychopath? And I deal with this thing about, what is and what isn't a psychopath. But anyway, let's just assume people kind of have a general idea. Someone who has a high level of needing stimulation, they get bored easy, they don't appear to have any sense of guilt, empathy in the strict sense, They are very manipulative, extremely good speakers, and able to convey information. Those kinds of characteristics are part of the diagnosis of someone having psychopathic personality. But I will note that those can be used for either good or evil. And so a pro-social psychopath is someone who uses it not for evil's sake, whereas an antisocial psychopath is one that has zero regard for others and will just plow through them. Usually the less intelligent of those people wind up in jail or not in a good position in society regarding career, family, and so forth. But in fairness, there are psychopaths who are fantastic mothers, fathers, really good at a lot of professions. But now why is it that about 2 or 3% of the population is psychopathic? If it's such a bad trait, it seems like it would have been bred out of the population. If they mess up relationships, maybe they don't. In some cases, if you're going from relationship to relationship, you might not be the kind that settled down and had 4 or 5 kids and that sort of thing. It should have been bred out. Or if people, that guy's a bad guy, don't date him. You would think it would have been bred out just under simple Darwinistic criteria. On the other hand, if you don't really get into Darwin and you feel that God put us here, then why did God create some people with these personality traits? And most evidence shows that you have to be born a psychopath to be a psychopath. Yes, you can turn off your emotions, but you actually can't. You can't shut down your emotions and become like a Mr. Spock from Star Trek or something like that voluntarily, because it's there. It's like saying I just won't pay attention to my foot itching or something like that, and therefore being in control. Well, you may be able to put it out of your mind, but eventually you're going to be reminded of your foot itching. Well, it's the same thing with psychopathy. Okay? People may act like psychopaths, but they're not really psychopaths. And people can be born psychopathic, and, depending on the environment they're raised in, it'll determine which direction they'll take in life. But anyway, what would be the reasons why, maybe from an evolutionary psychology standpoint, that we have psychopaths? Or why would God put psychopaths here? Let's take a look at that. 10 reasons. First reason I would point out is that one trait that we associate with psychopathy is a determination that you don't see in regular people. Again, it can be used for good or bad, but I say it's a determination to succeed. They have incredible focus if they want something. If they don't want something, then they won't pay much attention to it at all. But if they have a goal, be it everything from weightlifting to being a superb runner, succeeding in a particular business, getting the man or woman of their dreams, trying to do well in a business venture they set up, they have a determination that is unmatched. And so therefore, this is something that benefits people if they have it. So therefore, it's a trait that, whereas even if a person's psychopathic, we're going to admire and reward people who are able to function in this particular way. So, 1, determination to succeed. Now, the second one that's related to that is, number 2, a willingness to get the job done even if it's not pleasant. And And if a person's not handicapped by some of those traits I just brought up, and I'll get into this in just a moment in regards to empathy, but if you think about it, the image of the gunslinger who's been hired by the townspeople to protect them from this gang of outlaws that are raping and murdering their way through the countryside. The psychopath would be the one who would say, you know what, I'll take care of the job, and go out there and maybe with absolutely no remorse get rid of those outlaws, erase them, from the face of the earth. And a lot of times regular people are like, oh, I would like them not to be there, but and then they find a reason why they can't go out and do it. Oh, my leg hurts, I can't ride a horse, or something like that. And a psychopath wouldn't think in those terms. If they had a goal, be it vengeance or just a goal, they would accomplish it. So, think about this. Think about this. In the old days, well, maybe in the new day, we may have wind up with this in the future. Let's say you have an epidemic that is hit your society. And, we can use fictional example, The Walking Dead. The psychopath might be the one most likely if someone's bitten by the zombie, so to speak. And again, I'm using the zombie as a metaphor here for disease or whatever. The average person would be like, well, no, I can't. I'm not going to do harm to this person. We got to take care of them and these kinds of things. The psychopath would be like, oh, no. And if you watch the series, no. He's going to turn and he's going to start biting other people. And, maybe, it's for the benefit of society, it's better that person not be there, be they thrown out of the society or whatever, than to remain there. And most people would not be able to do that. Crime wave, I just mentioned, these kinds of things. Psychopaths would be more likely to do something, even if it's like something that would make people go, oh my gosh, this is so horrible. But it might save the society in the long run. Okay, so there's number 2, a willingness to get a job done, even if it's not pleasant. People higher in psychopathy are more willing to do that. And we can, again, you don't have to think of fictional examples or hypothetical examples. There's been times in the past where you had to control diseases like leprosy and things like that. Do you think it was easy for a society to be able to say, oh, my mom's got leprosy. She needs to go into the leper colony. You probably had people that were in that society who would come by and they would forcibly take your mom and put her in the leper colony. Whereas you might be like, no, we'll try not to catch it from her, which would then lead to your family being exposed to it. So perhaps a psychopathic person or persons that were in charge of that society would be able to maintain the health of that society, if need be. Okay, that was number 2. Now, associated with that is an idea of not being handicapped by empathy. Now, you see, in our society, we put a high emphasis on praising empathy and saying it's a good thing. But the problem with empathy is that sometimes when we think emotionally towards an issue, it's not the best thing to do. Again, if we had a major pandemic, like the Spanish flu epidemic, we might have to actually cordon off an area and say people from this area cannot travel into our region. Now, high empathetic people would say, no, this is wrong. We can't close our hearts. We need to, help people and so forth. if you were in a situation where, the old lifeboat scenario, you've got enough room on the lifeboat for 10 people, but you've got 13 people. The highly empathetic people might be saying, no, you can't force someone off the lifeboat or not let them get on. We need to pile everyone on, and then the lifeboat capsizes and everybody dies. Okay? Empathy is not necessarily a great trait to have. We want to have people caring for others. We want to have people that are there to do good, but sometimes doing good does harm in the long run. What if you're like, there's a tiger that's been eating people in your village, and you're like, yeah, but this is springtime and the tiger probably has cubs. I mean, it's not her fault that she's attacking people. I mean, you can't kill her. Well, maybe we set a trap and then try to haul her off, and then catch her cubs and then try to haul her into a new area. Well, that's only a luxury you might have in the modern day with tranquilizer guns and stuff like that. But in the old days, if too much empathy for the tiger and its cubs might mean that, more people in your village wind up becoming food. And so therefore, the person who was able to either shut off the empathy or didn't have a high level of empathy might be the one that got the job accomplished. Okay? Okay, so that was number 3. Now, some other things that are important, especially when we talk about the past and why the societies have succeeded, and in part because of psychopaths, is psychopaths, number 4, are good at organizing people. Okay? And, organizing people can mean a whole bunch of different things, but they're usually very persuasive. They're very good at you could say manipulation, because leadership and manipulation are the same word, really. If you look up the definitions, they essentially, even though they usually put a negative context in manipulation, but ultimately it's to get someone to do something that they normally wouldn't do. Okay? And so leadership and manipulation mean the same thing. And psychopaths are very good at organizing people and getting people to do things. Yes, they can be pushy. Yes, they can be manipulative. Yes, they can play games. But sometimes that's necessary to elect someone to office, getting the campaign volunteers organized and be able to elect someone, being able to defend your village, be able to do a whole variety of things. Organization of people, even though we may think, oh, but that's, again, we don't like people that force their will on us. Well, we are a communal species, and so therefore humans cannot survive independently. Okay? Nature, I'll be honest with you, nature's beautiful, but nature is always there to kill you. Okay? There's always something there. The plants we eat, we think, oh, this is so wonderful when I eat some of these green plants that are good for me. Well, actually, they all contain toxin. It's just humans have an ability not to be poisoned by that toxin. Some plants are a little bit more toxic and they irritate our stomachs, or else we have people that are allergic to them, or whatever. But plants produce natural toxins because they don't want to be eaten. All right? Fruit may be a bit different because you want something to eat the fruit, so then it goes and does a number 2 somewhere, and that seed is not only put somewhere where it'll grow, but also it gets some fertilization at the same time. But again, humans cannot survive in nature. Okay? Not in a natural state and not alone. We're not suited for it. So the ability to organize people is very important. Number 5, discipline in a society. Throwing someone in jail, even if they have done something bad, is difficult. All right? Executing someone is probably not the most pleasant thing to do. Getting people to do things that's hard, building monuments, whatever, building a dam to protect you from floods. You need to maintain discipline. People will do things for ultimately three different reasons: love, force, and money. Okay, and most people don't love you. That's just the fact of life. Force, sometimes it's been necessary to have force, to win a war or to build something that prevents a disaster. Money, well, if it's available, but even them, who's going to be the kind of people that go out and collect the money? All right, or be in charge of the people, being able to organize people to go do it for them. Probably high in psychopathy. So therefore, discipline in a society may require people at the top that are actually keeping that discipline going. Now, what if we get to number 6, which is actually the opposite of that? What if you have a tyrannical system? Maybe you got some really bad psychopaths, or you have a society that is just crumbling because maybe too much empathy or just weak. Who's going to run the revolution? Yep, you got it. People that are high in psychopathy. They're going to be the ones who are going to be able to organize a revolution and organize people to overthrow a tyrannical or a weak government that is hurting the people in the long run. Now, again, it doesn't mean that their motivations are going to be, I'm doing this for the love of humanity. It may be a selfish motivation. I don't know how many of our founding fathers of the United States were motivated by either high levels of psychopathy, maybe revenge on the British, or personal business interest ideas, or a true, desire towards building a better country. But any of those factors, including the last one I just noted about building a better country, would indicate probably a high level of psychopathy. Building the new Atlantis on the American continent. Yes, utopian vision usually requires a certain level of psychopathy because you're not thinking on the level of personal or even family level. You're thinking on a macroeconomic type of platform in which you need thousands, if not millions, of people working in unison. That means force. That means persuasion. That means psychopathy. Okay. And speaking in those same areas, what about war and conquest? I've heard people say, this land belonged to this people, or this land belonged to that people, and maybe they have a right to it or something. Every piece of land on Earth has been taken by whoever's on it today. Okay? Humans migrated. They started out, maybe nomadic. Okay, if you look at the conventional anthropological explanation of human development, you would say that at one time everyone was nomadic until some of them started getting into agriculture and planting plants. Well, that means you had to defend those plants. You didn't want some other group of people walking along going, oh, wow, look, there's some fruit trees, or oh, wow, there's some wheat growing, or whatever, and taking it. So you had to protect it. You had to use force to protect it. All right? So therefore, you needed some people to organize a society to keep the others out. And that created boundaries. And as time went on, years and years, centuries and centuries, boundaries changed. Maybe your group took over another person's land, or that group took over this part of the land, and so forth. All right? Movement, rearranging the world in regards to ethnic or whatever compositions that have existed throughout the millennium was due to this. And so if you had a society that was like, oh, yes, we're just here to be nice, and oh, this is your land, okay, all right. Oh, this is your river. Okay, well, we won't drink from that river. You see the point? It disappeared. Those ancestors disappeared. Only the people who were organized and the leadership was willing to organize to the point of war and conquest were the ones who wound up with land and water and the ability to be able to build civilizations. Okay? Again, it sounds bad. You're like, oh my gosh, it doesn't sound very nice. But that's just the way it was, and you could argue still is. Now, another area that I've dealt with, and people have, number 8, that people have kind of said, no, psychopaths are not creative. There's a lot of videos out there from people that say that they're experts on psychopathy. And they'll say psychopaths are not creative. They can only take from someone else. That's not true, actually. It's not true at all. There's been studies after studies that have shown that people with higher levels of psychopathy tend to be more creative. And also that is because they are able to break bounds. So here's an area where you can look at such things as art. I haven't studied it specifically, but maybe music. Other things when it comes to making something different. You see, humans are very much into status quo. Well, this is the way it's always been. Okay, that's just part of our nature. Maybe it's because what works, and we, don't want to mess around with it. Usually societies have been very slow to adapt to new technologies and so forth. But perhaps people that are psychopathic are willing to break those boundaries. I would say, and this is for better or for worse, maybe the people that are going to usher in transhumanism will be psychopaths. Because they're going to be like, oh wow, let's see what we can do with artificial intelligence. Oh wow, let's see what kind of robots we can create. Oh, I wonder if we can live forever. Those are the kinds of people who they're not going to be held back by people saying, no, this is not the way it's supposed to be done. We weren't created for this purpose. We shouldn't do this. We shouldn't tamper with nature. Psychopaths are more than willing to tamper with all of it. And if they're into science, then they are going to be, and I'm not saying mad scientist type things. They're going to be the ones saying, why not? Why not try something new? And they're going to be more likely to try something new. All right? Because they're not held back by people saying you shouldn't. I've noticed I've noticed some atheists will make comments like, do you ever notice how you don't see very many highly religious people in, the arts? And make it sound like that religious people aren't very smart. Well, that's not true. All right? It's not true. But what we usually prize in society is innovation and creativity in something. This is something that's not been done before. At least in Western society, that's the way we are. Oh wow, no one's ever done this. This is so spectacular. How did you get the inspiration to do this? There's a lot of people that are highly religious that probably got the same inspiration. But then they went, I don't think I want to do this. You can look at some of Salvador Dali's work, for instance, or Picasso's, or I'm not saying they're psychopaths, but they broke new ground. Okay? They did something other people would maybe feel a little bit like, no, I don't think I want to try that. Many authors, that do something totally unusual. Other people will say, nah. And again, I'm not saying any of these people, that have been very creative in arts. I'm not saying, oh, this one's a psychopath, this one isn't, or any of that, because it's impossible to tell. But I will say that things that might make the average person blush in the art world, psychopath is like, I wonder if, what they're going to say is not, should I do this? They're going to say, I wonder if I can get away with this. That's what's going to go through their mind. And then they do it, and then people are like, oh my gosh, how fantastic. Or if they write a novel, or they make a movie that's pushing the bounds. It's that's why, psychopathy can lead to higher creativity. Doesn't mean it's always good, okay? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that all the really weird stuff out there is good. But I'm saying that you could say it's at least creative in a sense. So therefore, psychopaths would be more likely in a society to be the innovators in those areas. Now, one other thing, number 9, is psychopaths may be very good at preserving democratic institutions. You're going, what? That sounds totally contrary to reasoning. These are people that are power hungry and fighting for power all the time. Well, you know what? The reason why we have a separation of powers in the United States is because our founding fathers recognized that there's always competition. People are fighting. I want your job. I want to have this power. I don't want your party in charge. I want my party in charge. And so therefore, you have competition. And so if everyone, think about this. What if instead of competition, we just had people running for office because they said, I can administer the society better. I'm pretty good at doing things. You know what we'd wind up with? We would wind up with bureaucratic stagnation, because the only people that would run for office would be the ones that, really were not motivated by achieving something major or power or making sure that they won over the other one. So you might as well just throw out the idea of competition. You might as well throw out the idea of having good, rousing debates. You would just have this kind of, well, I can do this. No, I can do this. And you would not have you would have a boring society. And you might actually wind up with a society that goes wrong because no one pays attention to what's going on in the society. So therefore, you might get boring, non-psychopathic people take control, but no one willing to do anything about it. And then therefore, they wind up creating a society that's probably, going to take away your rights more than any number, a society where maybe everyone running for office has a high level of psychopathy or narcissism within their system. Finally, number 10 is, I would say that psychopaths are very good at working under stress. They're the kind of people who, again, they can focus well, they don't care what other people are thinking, and they're also ambitious. So therefore, in a stressful situation, they're able to make decisions quickly, even if they're not popular decisions. They're able to bring things together. They can accomplish things. Now, I'm not saying that psychopath is going to be someone who you can totally think, oh, I just want to hire psychopaths in my job. I'm just saying that in many cases, some of your best workers can actually be psychopathic because they're going to be the most dedicated. What if you had a detective who was who has to deal with a really, really complicated case, and there's a lot of stress because everyone wants this case solved? Well, they're the kind of person who won't just suddenly freeze under stress. Psychopaths don't usually freeze under stress. Yes, psychopath actually, and this is true, can actually wind up with a panic attack, because everyone can. I mean, sometimes things can hit. But the irony is that many times I've heard about psychopaths having panic attacks is when the job's done and the stress is gone, and all of a sudden, there's not something there kind of pushing them along, and then everything kind of unwinds and leads to a panic attack. Not sure exactly what to do now. So the thing is that if you want, be an aircraft pilot, a fighter pilot, surgeon, has to work really quick to save a life, a detective that has to find the solution so they can stop this person that's out there, doing all kinds of mayhem in the society. Psychopaths are good at it. They don't feel stress the way that a lot of people do. Now, again, they can feel stress, all right, but they don't shut down. A lot of people, the reaction to stress is to suddenly freeze or panic or kind of get that stare where they're like, and not be able to take the next step. Psychopath, boom, they'll take the next step. They'll just do it. To them, to a large degree, it's a game. And they want to win the game. And so they'll do it. And that's, an advantage in society to have such people. Now, in conclusion, again, I'm not saying if there's women out there who need to go to a sperm bank or something like that they should go and ask the doctor to make sure that they, I just thought about that doctor. No, the regular doctors tend to be very low in psychopathy, whereas it's like surgeons and emergency room doctors who work under stress that tend to have high levels of psychopathy. But I wouldn't say that the average woman should go into the sperm clinic and say, "Do you have a psychopath, that donated so I could have their kids?" Although I have heard, this is interesting, I have actually heard that, at least people speculating that people that are men and women both who are more willing to go to a doctor and donate eggs or sperm and realize they've got kids all over the place. They might have 10, 20 kids that they'll never meet. Probably are high in at least narcissism or psychopathy. To be able to do that, because most people are like, no, I wouldn't want the idea of me having a child somewhere that I have nothing to do with its life, even if it's not really my kid, it's my genetic material. So you might actually have a higher level of people that donate that are psychopaths or narcissists. And so who knows, maybe you'll get a higher number of them in the future. It would be really a wonderful psychological study to see if indeed this is the case. Or find a person who's, let's say, the ideal, athletic, emergency room doctor who's high in psychopathy, have him donate, make, 20 kids, and then follow up 20 years later by giving, seeing how many of those 20 kids wind up as psychopaths. Would be an interesting study. It would be very interesting. At least it would give us some insights into the genetic versus the environmental factors that are involved in psychopathy. But ultimately, I'm just pointing out that there's a reason why this trait has persisted and has survived all of these thousands of years of human history. And it's because there are advantages given at the societal level by having such people. And so, again, it maybe doesn't sound nice. It doesn't sound like, oh, yes, this is so wonderful, let's go hug a psychopath. But it is something that seems to exist in our society and will continue to exist.